"You pulled me from death," Mafia boss said, then landed a helicopter. At her tiny shack, the wind was a blade. Eva Carter felt it slice through the thin fabric of her coat, a personal offense against the 28 years she had spent fighting this mountain. The snow was not an idle, drifting fall. It was a horizontal assault, a whiteout blizzard that had descended on Ash Hollow, West Virginia, with the sudden, spiteful violence of a trapped animal. Her shift at the diner had ended at 2 a.m. The walk from the main road, where the infrequent bus had abandoned her, was over a mile up a logging trace that was generous to call a path. Her tiny shack, a relic of coal boom hope long since rotted, waited in the dark. She was exhausted. Her feet were numb. Her pockets held a $6 tip, and her mind was a dull buzz of unpaid bills and the lingering smell of burnt coffee. She kept her head down, following the beam of her weak flashlight, a pale circle on the churning snow. That was why she almost missed him. At first, she thought it was a deer, a dark lump against the white pine roots just off the path, a poacher's kill. Maybe. But the shape was wrong. It was too broad in the shoulders, and even through the snow, she could see the unnatural black of a man's coat. Her stomach clenched with a fear she knew well. A drunk. Probably passed out from the bar in town. If he stayed here, he would be dead by morning. "Hey," she called out, her voice stolen by the wind. "Hey, you can't sleep here." No response. Fear gave way to a weary, irritated compassion. She kicked the snow from her boots and trudged off the path, sinking to her knees. She grabbed the shoulder and shook. "Get up, you'll freeze." The body was heavy, inert. She pushed the snow away from his face, and her glove came away wet. Not with snow, not with rain, it was dark, hot and sticky. Eva recoiled, falling back into the snowdrift. She scrambled for her flashlight, her frozen fingers fumbling with the switch. She clicked it on, the weak yellow beam cutting through the white flurry. He was laying on his front, one arm flung out. The snow beneath his ribs was a sickening, spreading stain of crimson. He was dressed in clothes she had only seen in magazines, a fine wool overcoat, now ruined, leather shoes, soaked and useless. He was not a local. He was not a drunk. He was dying. She stood there for a full minute, the wind screaming in her ears. She could leave. She could run to her shack, lock the door, and pretend she had seen nothing. He was probably a criminal. Good clothes and a bullet wound in the middle of the night spelled trouble. The kind that did not visit waitresses in Ash Hollow. It spelled law, and she wanted no part of that. He groaned. It was a low, guttural sound, the noise of a man trying to breathe around a lungful of broken glass. "Damn it," Eva whispered, the word a plume of white smoke. She was not strong, but desperation was its own kind of muscle. She grabbed the collar of his coat. "Come on, you are not dying on my property." It was not a drag so much as a series of controlled falls. She hauled, slipped, regained her footing, and hauled again. He was a dead weight, a 6-foot-plus anchor of muscle and wet wool. The 20 yards to her shack felt like a mile. Her back screamed, her lungs burned. She cursed him, cursed the snow, cursed the broken porch step that snagged his boot. She finally got him inside, collapsing onto the rough floorboards. The door slammed shut against the wind, and the tiny room was plunged into a sudden, roaring silence, broken only by the man's ragged breathing and her own desperate gasps. The shack was one room, a cot, a wood stove, a sink that dripped, and a small table. It was cold. The fire in the stove was down to embers. She turned her attention to the man, now that he was in the dim light of her single lamp. She could see him. His face was pale, almost blue, with a strong jaw and a mouth set in a grimace of pain, black hair, damp with sweat and snow. He looked to be in his mid-30s, and he was bleeding to death on her floor. "Okay," she said to herself, forcing her hands to stop shaking. "Okay." She fed kindling into the stove, her hands automatic. Get the heat going. Then, the wound. She had to cut the coat and the expensive-looking shirt beneath it. The fabric was saturated. The wound was on his side, a ragged, dark hole high on his ribs. It looked like 2 bullets, one in, one out, or maybe 2 in. She did not know. She was a waitress, not a nurse. She did what she could. Her medical supplies consisted of a dusty first aid kit, a half-empty bottle of cheap whiskey, and a sewing kit. She poured the whiskey onto a dish rag, biting her lip as she pressed it against the wound. He did not flinch, but a low hiss of air escaped his teeth. He was still unconscious, but the pain was getting through. She cleaned it as best she could, her stomach rolling at the coppery smell of blood. She had no surgical tools, only a sewing needle that she sterilized in the lamp's flame until it glowed orange. She used white thread. It was all she had. She stitched the wound closed, her work clumsy and ugly. She pulled the skin tight, her hands sticky with his blood. He was burning up. The fever had already set in, a violent, trembling shiver that rocked his whole body. She bandaged his ribs with strips torn from an old bedsheet, the cleanest thing she owned. She managed to heave him onto her narrow cot, covering him with every blanket she had. He was unresponsive, his breathing shallow, through the long, terrifying night. Eva sat in her wooden chair, feeding the stove and watching him. The fear was a cold knot in her stomach. Who was he? Who had shot him? And were they still out there, looking for him? Just before dawn, her practical survivor's mind cut through the panic. She needed to know. She patted down the pockets of his discarded, bloody coat. Her fingers found two things. The first was a wallet. She opened it with trembling hands. A driver's license, an Italian name she could not pronounce, Dante Moretti, a New York address, and a stack of cash that made her eyes water, more money than she made in 6 months. The second thing was in his waistband, tucked against the small of his back, a place she had missed in her panic, a gun. It was black, heavy, and cold. It felt wrong in her hand, heavier than its physical weight. It was the weight of the life he lived. The life that had followed him here. She stared at the gun, then at the man. He was a killer, or he knew killers. He was dangerous. She took the gun and the wallet. She crossed to the far wall, pried up the loose floorboard where she kept her meager emergency stash, $100 and her mother's ring, and dropped them in. She pushed the board back into place, kicking the threadbare rug over it. Her fear was justified. But when she looked back at the man on her cot, he was not a threat. He was just a man, shivering so hard the cot rattled. His fever was raging. She boiled snow for water, forcing spoonfuls of it past his cracked lips. He muttered in his delirium, words she could not understand. The blankets were not enough. The stove was roaring, but the shack was old and full of drafts. He was freezing from the inside out. She hesitated, her fear warring with a deeper, older instinct. She had found stray dogs on this mountain, half-frozen, and brought them back. This was no different. Sighing, she took the last, thin blanket from her own bed, the floor, and lay down on the cot next to him. She did not get under the covers. She lay on top, pressing her back against his, a solid line of warmth against the violent shiver. She closed her eyes, not to sleep, but to listen, to the storm, to his breathing. She would keep him warm with her own body heat if she had to. She was afraid, but she was not cruel. Morning came in shades of bruised gray. The storm had passed, leaving the world muffled and still. Eva woke with a stiff neck, her back aching. She had dozed off in the chair, the fire long since burned down to coals. The shack was freezing. The man on the cot was still. For a terrifying second, she thought he was dead. She rushed over, putting her hand on his forehead. The fever had broken. His skin was cool and clammy. His eyes snapped open. They were not the dull, feverish eyes of last night. They were sharp, intelligent, and full of a cold, clear hostility. In one blurred motion, his hand shot out and clamped around her wrist. His grip was not that of a sick man. It was a vice. Eva did not scream. She just froze. "Where am I?" His voice was a low rasp, thick with a New York accent that was as foreign in this shack as his $1,000 suit. "You're safe," Eva said, her own voice surprisingly calm. "Let go of my wrist." He stared at her, his gaze sweeping the tiny room. He took in the peeling wallpaper, the wood stove, the chipped mugs. He was assessing, calculating. He saw no threat. He released her. He tried to sit up, but a sharp, agonizing pain shot through his side. He grunted, his face turning ashen as he fell back against the pillow. "You were shot," Eva said, rubbing her wrist. She walked to the stove and began to feed it wood. She would not show him fear. "Twice. I think you were in the snow. I found you." He was breathing hard. His eyes closed against the pain. "My coat. It's ruined, bloody. My wallet. My gun." His voice was steel. "I hid them," Eva said simply, not turning from the stove. "In case you were dangerous." A low, humorless laugh escaped him, ending in a cough. "And am I?" "You're alive," she said, turning. "That's all I know. I don't want anything from you. I don't care who you are. I couldn't let you die out there." He studied her. He saw the exhaustion under her eyes, the worn-out flannel shirt, the stubborn set of her jaw. In his world, no one did anything for free. Kindness was a currency for a transaction he had not yet seen. "What's your name?" he rasped. "Eva. I need to make a call." "There's no phone," she said. "No signal up here unless you're standing on the ridge, and you are not going to the ridge." He cursed. A low, vicious string of words. He was trapped. Weak. He looked at her, his suspicion a palpable thing. "Who are you?" "I told you. Eva. I work at the diner in town. That's it." She dipped a cloth in the bucket of melted snow and brought it to him. "You need to rest. You lost a lot of blood." He refused to give her his name. He watched her every move with a predator's intensity. That afternoon, she was cleaning the blood from the floor when she looked at the ruined jacket. It was expensive. Tailored, on the inside lining, near the breast pocket, were 2 stitched initials. J.M. "I'm going to call you J," she announced, scrubbing at a dark stain. He was silent. "It's better than, hey you," she said. "And I'm not calling you by the name in that wallet. I don't want to know that man." A flicker of something, surprise, perhaps, crossed his features. He turned his head on the pillow. "Fine." They existed in this tense silence for 2 days. Eva went to her shift, lying and saying her cousin was in town. Sick, which is why she looked so tired. She came back with broth from the diner, bandages and a small bottle of aspirin. He was a good patient in that he was a terrible patient. He hated being weak. He hated her helping him. But he ate the broth, and he let her check the stitches. He was healing at an unnatural rate, the raw power in his body fighting its way back. On the 3rd day, the knock came. It was not a polite knock. It was a heavy-fisted banging that rattled the door in its frame. Eva froze. Jay was instantly alert. He was sitting up, his face grim. "Who is it?" he whispered. "My ex." Eva breathed, her face pale. "Rick, he's drunk. Don't say anything." The banging came again. "Eva, I know you're in there. I saw the smoke from the stove. You lying bitch." "Go away, Rick," Eva called out, her voice shaking. The door burst open, the cheap lock giving way. Rick filled the doorway. He was a big man gone to seed, his face puffy and red from whiskey and rage. He wore a stained work jacket and smelled like a brewery. "Who the hell is this?" he snarled, his eyes landing on Jay on the cot. "He's my cousin," Eva said, moving between them. "He's sick." "Rick, leave us alone." Rick's eyes narrowed. "Your cousin? From where? You ain't got no family." "Eva, not since your mama ran off." "Just get out," Eva said, planting her feet. Rick laughed, a wet, ugly sound. He advanced into the room. Jay watched him, his body coiled. He was still too weak to stand, but his hands were clenched into fists. "You missed your shift yesterday," Rick said. "Bye." His eyes scanning the room, noticing the extra plate. "Boss man is pissed. You think you're too good for us now? Shacking up with some city slicker?" "It's not like that. He's hurt." Rick's gaze fell on the bandages visible under Jay's shirt. He sneered. "Hurt or hiding?" He looked back at Eva. "You're coming with me. We're going to talk." He reached for her, his thick fingers grabbing her arm. Eva cried out, a small, sharp sound of pain. Jay moved. He did not get up, but his voice cut through the room, low and lethal. "Take your hand off her." Rick froze. He turned, surprised. He had dismissed the man on the cot as a non-threat. "What did you say to me?" Rick said, letting go of Eva to puff out his chest. "I said," Jay repeated, his eyes flat and dead, "take your hand off her and get out, now." The authority in his voice was absolute. It was the voice of a man who had never been disobeyed, a man who gave orders that were followed, or else. Rick, for all his drunken bluster, was fundamentally a coward. He recognized something in Jay that terrified him on a primal level. He looked from Jay's cold eyes to Eva, who was rubbing her arm. He tried to save face. "This ain't over, Eva," he spat. "You hear me? This ain't over." He backed out of the shack, pulling the broken door shut behind him. They listened as his 4-cylinder engine roared to life, spraying snow as he tore back down the path. The silence he left behind was heavy. Eva was shaking, her face buried in her hands. Jay watched her, his jaw tight, a muscle ticking in his cheek. He had seen the way Rick grabbed her. He had seen the yellowing bruise on her wrist that she tried to hide with her sleeve, a bruise that predated this encounter. A silent, simmering rage, colder and more potent than Rick's drunken fury, settled in his chest. That night, the atmosphere in the shack had changed. The barrier of patient and nurse was gone. They sat by the fire, Eva on her chair, Jay on the edge of the cot. "He's done that before," Jay stated. It was not a question. Eva stared into the flames. "Rick, he gets mean. He thinks he owns me. He owned this shack before the bank took it. He thinks I came with the property. Why do you stay here?" Eva finally looked at him. "Where would I go, Jay? This is it. This is all I have. All I've ever had. My dad left. My mom took off 7 years ago. There's just the diner, the debt. I'm just trying to survive each day." She looked so tired, so utterly alone. "I don't know who you are," she said quietly. "And I don't want to know what you did to get shot. I don't want to know who is looking for you. I just want this to be over." She was not asking for his story. She was telling him hers. The loneliness poured out of her. A quiet, desperate confession. He just listened. In his world, people talked to get something. They whined, they begged, they betrayed. This was different. This was just testimony. Later, she had to change his bandages again. She knelt in front of him. The firelight played over his face, softening the hard lines, but his eyes were still sharp. "This will sting," she said, her voice husky. She dipped the cloth in the last of the whiskey. He just nodded, watching her. She gently dabbed at the stitches. Her work was crude, but it was holding. The skin was healing. She worked with a focus, her brow furrowed. She was so close. He could smell the faint, clean scent of soap on her skin, mixed with the wood smoke in her hair. Her fingers were light, careful. He had been touched by women his whole life, women who wanted his money, his power, his protection. He had never been touched like this, without agenda, with simple, uncomplicated care. As she finished, she reached for the roll of bandages. Her hand brushed the bare skin of his stomach, just above his waistband. He flinched, not from pain but from the jolt of it. She pulled her hand back. "Sorry, don't be," he rasped. Their eyes met. The space between them crackled. He lifted his hand, the one that was not wrapped around her wrist in violence, but open. He grazed his knuckles along her jaw, a touch so light it was barely there. She leaned into it, a small, involuntary movement. He caught her wrist, not in a grip, but a circle of his thumb and forefinger. His thumb traced the thin, blue veins. The touch lingered, a second, 2 seconds. Too long. It was a question, an acknowledgement, a promise of things that had no place in this shack, in her life. Eva's breath hitched. She saw the question in his eyes, the dark pull of something she was not ready for. She pulled her wrist away, her movement gentle but firm. "You need to sleep," she whispered. She stood up, gathered the bloody rags, and turned her back on him. She did not see the look on his face, a mixture of frustration, hunger, and a strange, unfamiliar tenderness. Nothing had happened, but in the cold, quiet shack, surrounded by a world of snow, everything had changed. The man Eva called Jay was not built for stillness. He had spent 2 full days on the cot, his body locked in a fevered battle, and another 2 days in a silent, coiled truce with his own weakness. By the 5th day, he was moving. Eva would wake to find him sitting on the edge of the cot, his jaw tight, testing the pull of her clumsy stitches. By the 6th day, he was on his feet. His strength returned with a speed that was unsettling. The man was forged from something harder than normal flesh. Eva, returning from a long shift at the diner, found him outside by her meager woodpile. He had taken her axe. He was not wearing a shirt. Despite the biting cold, the winter sun was a weak disk in the sky, and it illuminated the topography of his body. He was not just fit, he was weaponized. His back was a landscape of lean, functional muscle, scarred in 3 places. The bandages she had wrapped around his chest were stark white against his skin. As she watched, he swung the axe. It was not the hacking, sloppy motion of a man just trying to get wood. It was a single, fluid, violent motion. The axe head met the oak round with a percussive thwack that echoed in the cold air, splitting the wood perfectly in 2. He did not pause. He set another round and swung again. Thwack, split. He knew she was there. He had known the second her boots crunched on the snow path, but he did not turn. "You are going to rip your stitches," she said, her voice thin. He stopped. The axe held loosely in one hand. He turned, his breath plumed. "I'm not. You do not know that." "I do," he said, his voice flat. He looked at her, and a flicker of something she had not seen before, annoyance, at his own limitations, crossed his face. "I need to be useful. Being useful is not bleeding to death on my floor." Again, he almost smiled. It was a tightening of his mouth. He picked up a flannel shirt she had left on the porch rail, one of her father's, left behind years ago, and slid it on, wincing as he pulled it over his injured side. They fell into a new, unspoken rhythm. He was repaying his debt, one chore at a time. He worked silently, with a restless, caged energy. He chopped enough wood to last a month. He found the loose shingles on her roof and, despite her protests, climbed up and fixed them, moving with a sure-footed, feline grace. Eva watched him. She learned more about him from his silence than she ever had from his words. She learned he was tactical. When he was outside, he never stood in the open. He kept to the shadows of the shack, his back to the wall, his gaze constantly scanning the tree line. She learned he was powerful. When she fixed the roof, she had used nails and a hammer. He had used his hands and a few salvaged pieces of tin, bending the metal in a way she did not think was possible. And she learned he was dangerous. He moved too quietly, several times. She would be washing a dish or reading a book, thinking she was alone, only to turn and find him standing in the doorway, just watching her. He never made a sound. It was this danger that began to stir something else, a low, thrumming hum of awareness. She was a woman who had spent her life trying to be invisible, to avoid the casual brutality of men like Rick. But Jay was not like Rick. Rick was a blunt object. Jay was a honed blade. He was also more observant than she knew. One evening, she was adding wood to the stove, and her sleeve rode up, revealing the dark, mottled purple on her inner arm. The fingerprints Rick had left behind. She pulled the sleeve down quickly, but not quickly enough. Jay, who was cleaning the gun he had retrieved from its hiding place, went still. His hands, which had been moving over the oiled steel with an expert's familiarity, stopped. Eva held her breath. She expected a question. She expected pity or anger. He said nothing. He simply reassembled the weapon with a series of cold, efficient clicks. He checked the magazine. He set the gun on the small table next to the cot, within easy reach. He did not hide it under the floorboards again. He did not ask her about the bruises. He just kept the weapon close. The next day, the near kiss happened. The path to the creek, where she got her fresh water, was a sheet of treacherous ice. She was carrying 2 buckets, her head down, navigating the slippery patches. She did not see the black ice near the porch step. Her feet went out from under her. She cried out, the buckets flying, water and ice spraying into the air. She did not hit the ground. He was there. He had moved from the woodpile to her side in a blink, his arm, the one not bandaged, wrapped around her waist, pulling her back from the fall. Her body slammed into his. She was pressed against his chest, her hands flat on his shoulders to balance herself. He was solid. Everywhere. His hand was a brand on her waist, his fingers splayed wide. "You all right?" he rasped. She looked up. Her face was inches from his. She could see the faint stubble on his jaw, the dark, complex color of his eyes. They were not just brown. They were black coffee, with flecks of gold. His gaze was not on her eyes. It was on her mouth. The world stopped. The only sounds were the drip of water from the spilled bucket and the ragged intake of her own breath. He was going to kiss her. She knew it. And in that frozen second, she wanted to know if his mouth was as hard as the rest of him. His eyes locked on hers. She saw a war in them, a hunger, deep and raw, fighting with a cold, hard control. The control won. He set her upright, his hand leaving her waist as if it were burned. He stepped back, putting a foot of cold air between them. "Be careful," he said, his voice rough. He turned and walked away, back to the woodpile, grabbing the axe as if it were an anchor. Eva stood there, shaking, her heart hammering against her ribs. She was not cold anymore. She was on fire. That night, she had the nightmare. It was an old, familiar one. She was running from Rick, but her feet were stuck in mud. He was laughing, his face twisting, but as she fell, it was not Rick who caught her. It was a man with no face, a man who smelled of gunpowder and cold. She woke with a gasp, sitting bolt upright in her makeshift bed on the floor. The fire was low. The cot was empty. Panic seized her. He was gone. He had left in the night. The relief and the disappointment were so tangled. She could not breathe. Then she saw the door was open, just a crack. She crept over, pulling her thin blanket around her. She looked out onto the porch. He was there, a dark silhouette against the blue-white snow. He was standing motionless, wearing only the flannel shirt and his dark pants, staring into the woods. He was utterly still, like a predator, listening for the snap of a twig. "Jay," she whispered. He did not startle. He had known she was awake. "Go back to bed. Eva? What are you doing? It's freezing." He did not look at her. His focus was absolute, locked on the dark, silent trees. Listening. For what? For anything that doesn't belong. She stepped out onto the porch, the cold instantly biting at her bare feet. "You're scaring me." "Good," he said, his voice a low rumble. "You should be scared, but not of me." He finally turned his head. His profile was sharp in the moonlight. "No one's coming up that path tonight. Not Rick. Not anyone." She shivered. "And it was not just from the cold. How do you know?" "Because I am here." He looked back at the woods. "You're safer than you think." The words hung in the air. A strange, absolute promise. She went back inside, but she did not sleep. The black SUV appeared 2 days later. Eva had walked into town to pick up her $7 paycheck and a few groceries she bought on credit. The walk back was long, the dread of returning to the tense silence of the shack weighing on her. She saw it as she rounded the final bend, where the logging trace met the county road. It was parked in the cutout, half hidden by pine boughs, a black, shining Suburban, the kind government men or drug dealers drove. The windows were tinted so dark, they looked like mirrors. It did not belong in Ash Hollow. Her blood ran cold. She did not run. She ducked into the trees, circling wide, using the cover of the woods to approach her shack from the back. She burst through the door, her lungs burning. Jay was on his feet instantly, the gun in his hand. "What?" "A truck," she panted, leaning against the door. "A black SUV, down by the road. It's parked, hidden." The change in him was terrifying. The quiet, brooding man she called Jay vanished. In his place was a stranger. His eyes went flat, a low curse, sharp and in Italian, slipped from his lips. He was pacing the tiny room, a caged tiger. "How many? Did you see them?" "No. The windows are black. I did not get close." "Good. You did good." He ran a hand through his hair, his mind clearly working faster than she could follow. He stopped, his eyes landing on the flimsy door. "This is not good. We need locks. Deadbolts. I need security cameras." "What?" Eva stared at him. "Cameras. Jay, this is a shack." "What are you talking about?" "He found me," he muttered to himself, ignoring her. "He tracked me." He looked at her, his eyes blazing. "I need to secure the perimeter. This is my home. It's not a fortress." "It is now," he said, his voice cold. "No." Eva's own fear and frustration boiled over. I will not have cameras and new locks. I am not a prisoner. I've spent my whole life being scared and hiding. I don't want my life to become a prison. Jay, I won't let you do it." He stopped pacing. He looked at her, his expression unreadable. He saw the panic in her eyes, the stubborn set of her jaw. She was terrified, but she was not broken. He took a step toward her. She flinched. He stopped, slowly, as if gentling a spooked horse. He raised his hand, he laid his palm against her cheek. His skin was rough, but the gesture was shockingly tender. "Then let me guard the door," he said, his voice dropping to a low, raw whisper. "Not lock it." The tension held, thick and suffocating. For the rest of the day, the SUV was gone when he checked, but that did not comfort him. It made him worse. They were scouting. That evening, the dam broke. It was not the SUV, or the gun, or the man. It was a letter. It had been in her pocket all day. A final notice from the bank. They were seizing the shack. She had 30 days. It was the final, tiny weight that shattered her. She went to the small, curtained-off corner that served as her bathroom, clutching the letter. She thought she was being quiet. She was just trying to breathe. But a sound escaped her. A low, choked sob of pure, undiluted despair. It was not just the shack. It was the loneliness, the fear, the crushing, absolute certainty that her life would never, ever get better. The curtain was ripped back. Jay stood there. He had heard. His face was granite. "What is it?" She could not speak. She just held up the letter. He scanned it. His eyes narrowed. He looked from the paper to her face, her tear-streaked, devastated face. She expected him to offer money. She expected him to say something cold and practical. He did neither. He said nothing. He simply reached out, pulled her from the corner, and wrapped his arms around her. He held her. He tucked her head under his chin and held her while she fell apart. He was a solid, immovable object in her swirling world of chaos. His arms were steel bands, not of passion, but of pure, grounding protection. He held her as she cried for her mother, for her lost future, for the $7 in her pocket. He just held her, and he did not let go. Later, the crying had stopped. She was empty. They were sitting by the fire, the silence comfortable for the first time. The air was different. The last barrier between them had been dissolved by her tears. He was on the cot. She was in the chair. The firelight flickered, painting his face in shadow and gold. "Eva," he said. She looked at him. He did not move. He just watched her, his eyes intense. He was asking. She stood. She crossed the small space between them and knelt in front of him, on the floor by the cot. She was not sure what she was doing. She just knew she needed to be close. He reached out, his hand repeating the gesture from the porch, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw. "You're trembling," he whispered. "I'm cold." She lied. "You are not." His thumb brushed her bottom lip. A jolt went through her, sharp and sweet. "I should not," he started, his voice rough. "Do not talk," she whispered. And she was not sure who she was warning. He leaned in. He was slow, giving her every chance to pull away. She did not. His lips touched hers. It was not a kiss. It was a question. It was hesitant, impossibly soft. It was just the barest press of his mouth, warm and firm, against hers. Eva's eyes closed. A small sound, half sigh, half sob, escaped her. That was all the answer he needed. He moved his other hand to the back of her neck, his fingers tangling in her hair. He tilted her head, and this time, he kissed her. It was not soft. It was not hesitant. It was a kiss of desperation, of a week of pent-up hunger, of a man starved for something human. It was deep and raw and possessive. His mouth claimed hers with an authority that left her breathless. It was the fire and the ice and the fear all rolled into one. She did not just accept it, she met him. Her hands came up, gripping the front of his shirt, holding on as if he were the only solid thing on earth. She kissed him back with all the loneliness and all the fight she had in her. He growled, a low sound in his chest, and pulled her closer, deepening the kiss. His tongue tracing her lips. He was the one who broke it. He tore his mouth from hers, his chest heaving. He rested his forehead against hers. His eyes closed. He was shaking. "Not yet," he whispered, his voice a gravelly ruin. He sounded like he was in pain. "I cannot, not like this. Jay, I do not—" "No." He pulled back, his hands gripping her shoulders. He looked her in the eyes, and she saw the full weight of the man she had saved. "My name is not Jay." Eva went still. "I have to tell you, before this, before—" He stood, moving to the fire, needing the distance. He turned to face her. "My name is Dante Moretti." He said it like an executioner. Eva just stared. The name meant nothing to her. He saw her confusion. "I am the head of the Moretti family, from New York." He watched her, gauging her reaction. Still nothing. "The Moretti crime family? Eva?" He spelled it out, his voice sharp. "The Mafia. I was betrayed, ambushed by someone in my own organization. They left me for dead. That is how you found me." The revelation hung in the room, heavier than the gun on the table, more dangerous than the storm outside. He was not just a man, he was a king from a dark, violent world. And she had stitched him back together. The words hung in the air, cold and heavy. Dante Moretti, the Mafia. Eva did not faint, she did not scream. She had spent her entire life on a knife's edge, balancing poverty, loneliness, and the casual menace of men like Rick. She was a woman who knew how to look danger in the eye and keep breathing. She just stared at him, her mind absorbing the shape of this new, terrible truth. It was not the word mafia that shocked her. It was the realization that the danger she had sensed in him, the coiled violence, was not just a feeling. It was a fact. The black SUV was not her imagination. The gun was not just for show. "So, Jay is not— that is not your name," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "It is not," Dante said. He watched her, his posture rigid, bracing for the fear, the rejection. "You were ambushed." He nodded. "A meeting, a trap, someone in my inner circle, someone I trusted. They were waiting for me, my men." "They were not as lucky." His voice was flat, devoid of emotion, which was more terrifying than if he had yelled, "I was hit. I drove until the car died. Then I ran. I just ran, toward the mountains. I thought I could lose them in the storm." He looked at the floor, at the spot where she had scrubbed his blood from the wood. "The last thing I remember is the snow. Then, you." Eva crossed her arms, rubbing the chill from her skin. "Are you a bad man, Dante?" The question was so simple, so direct, it seemed to rock him. He met her gaze. There were no lies in his eyes. "Yes," he said. Eva's breath hitched, but she held his stare. "I have done things, Eva, things you cannot imagine. I have lived a life that is built on violence and fear. I will not lie to you about that. Have you killed people?" "Yes." The admission was brutal. He offered no excuses. Eva walked to the small, dirty window, looking out at the endless, peaceful white of the snow. She was looking for a path, a way out of this conversation, a way back to the simple ignorance of an hour ago. There was none. She turned back to him. Do you hurt innocent people? People like me?" Dante's expression shifted. The coldness was replaced by a sudden, fierce intensity. He took a step toward her. "Never." His voice was a low growl. "Never. The men I deal with, they choose the life. They know the rules. We do not touch civilians. We do not harm the innocent. That is the line. The one who betrayed me. He crossed that line by putting you in danger, by bringing this to your door." She believed him. It was a strange instinctive trust. He was a monster, perhaps, but he was a monster with a code. She sank into her chair by the dying fire. the adrenaline of the night finally leaving her. She felt exhausted and old. "So what now?" she asked. "Are they still looking for you?" "They are. They think I am dead or dying, but they will not leave it to chance. They will hunt until they find a body." A long silence filled the room. Eva poked the embers in the stove. He was a problem. A massive, deadly problem. She should be terrified. She should be running. But the man who had just admitted to being a killer was the same man who had held her while she cried over a bank notice. He was the man who had stopped when he did not have to. "Why did you not just die out there?" she asked quietly, her voice full of a genuine, weary curiosity. "You were ready, were you not? When I found you, I could feel it. You were ready to let go." Dante looked at her, and the hard mafia boss, the killer, was gone. She saw only the man she had pulled from the snow. "I was," he admitted, his voice raw. "I was tired. I was bleeding. I was done. I closed my eyes and I was ready." He looked at her, his gaze so intense it was almost a physical touch. "Maybe I needed to meet you first." The words settled between them, a fragile, dangerous truce. Before Eva could respond, Dante moved. He went to his ruined, bloody overcoat, which he had folded on a back shelf. He felt along the hem, his fingers probing. He found a small tear in the lining, and from within the expensive wool. He pulled a small, slim object wrapped in plastic, a satellite phone. He punched in a single number, his thumb moving with practiced ease. He put it to his ear. It rang once. "Carlo," he said. The voice was Jay's again. No, it was Dante's, the one he used for business, cold, clipped, and full of authority. He listened. "I am alive. No, do not ask. I am secure, but I am compromised. No, that is an order. You stay away. You bring no one. They are looking. If you move, they will see you, and you will lead them right to me." He paced, the cord of tension in his shoulders tightening. "Listen to me. The organization is poisoned. Luca, I think it was Luca. Watch him. Trust no one. Not even family. You are my only eyes." I said, "Stay away. I do not want this fire burning what is left. I will contact you when it is clean. Until then, I am a ghost." He ended the call, not waiting for a reply. He pulled the battery from the phone and slid it into his pocket. He looked at Eva. "You are in danger," he said, and he hated himself for it. "Because of me? Because you were kind. I do not—" Eva started. She was cut off by a sound, the roar of an engine, too loud, too close. A truck door slamming, and then the heavy, drunken footsteps on her porch. Before Dante could move, the door flew open. The broken lock offered no resistance. Rick stood there, his face a mask of purple rage. He was drunker than last time, his eyes bloodshot and wild. "You!" he roared, his eyes landing on Eva. "You cost me my job." "What?" Eva said, confused. "I went to the diner to find you. You missed your shift, and that prick, your boss, he said I was harassing his staff. He fired me. From the mill, he called my boss. Rick, I did not— Young?" "I had nothing to do with that," Eva said, backing away. Dante was standing by the cot, in the shadows. Rick, in his rage, had not even seen him. "You are a lying whore!" Rick screamed. "You and your city boyfriend!" He lunged, grabbing Eva by the front of her shirt. He was not just grabbing, he was pulling, dragging her toward the door. "You are going to fix this!" Eva screamed. Dante moved. He was not the weak, injured Jay. He was not the contemplative, vulnerable man by the fire. He was Dante Moretti. He crossed the room in 2 strides. He did not yell. He did not warn. His right hand shot out and clamped onto Rick's shoulder, spinning him around, his left hand open. Struck Rick across the jaw. It was not a punch. It was a precise, brutal strike that snapped Rick's head back with a sickening crack of bone. Rick staggered, stunned, his grip on Eva loosening. Dante did not stop. He grabbed Rick by the throat, his fingers digging in. He slammed him back against the wall of the shack. The entire structure shuddered. Jars rattled on the shelf. "Dante!" Eva cried. Rick's eyes were wide with terror. He clawed at Dante's hand, but it was like trying to move granite. Dante's face was unrecognizable. It was a cold, Roman mask of absolute death. He was not angry. He was executing. "You do not touch her," Dante whispered, his voice a venomous hiss. He began to lift Rick off the floor, his forearm bunching. Rick's face was turning a deep, dark red, his feet kicked uselessly. "Dante, stop!" Eva screamed, grabbing his arm. "You are killing him, stop!" Her voice cut through his cold rage. He looked at her, his eyes still black. He saw the terror on her face, not of Rick, of him. With a final, guttural roar, he released his grip. Rick dropped to the floor, a sack of rags, choking, coughing, and vomiting. Dante stood over him, his chest heaving. He was a different species, a wolf in a room of sheep. He crouched, grabbing Rick's hair, yanking his head up. "Listen to me," Dante said, his voice deadly calm. "This woman is under my protection. If you ever come near this shack again, if you say her name to another living soul, if you even think about her, I will find you, and I will not stop. I will unmake you, piece by piece. There is no police you can go to. There is no one who can protect you from me. Do you understand?" Rick, crying and gasping, nodded frantically. "Get out!" Dante released him. Rick scrambled on all fours like a beaten dog, crab-walking his way out the door. He fell off the porch, got to his feet, and ran, tumbling into the snow, back to his truck. They heard the engine start, the tires spinning, and then he was gone. The silence that descended was absolute. Eva was shaking so hard, her knees gave out. She slumped against the wall, sliding down to sit on the floor, her hands covering her face. Dante did not move. He was still in the kill stance, his body vibrating with adrenaline. He looked at his hands, the hands that had just held her, and the hands that had just nearly taken a life. He slowly, consciously, forced his fists to uncoil. He took a deep breath. He turned to her. She was crying, not loud sobs, just silent, terrified tears. He knelt in front of her, his heart breaking. He had done this. He had brought this to her. "Eva," he said. She looked up. I was so scared. He is gone. He will not be back." "No," she said, her voice shaking. "Not him. I was scared of you. For a second. You were not Jay." "I am not," he said, his voice rough with regret. She looked at him, really looked at him, at the man who had just revealed a capacity for violence that she could barely comprehend. But he had stopped. He had stopped for her. She reached out, her hand trembling, and laid it on his arm. "Thank you," she whispered. That was it. The gratitude, the terror, the intimacy, the violence. It all crashed together. The tension that had been building for days, the near kisses, the confessions. It could not be contained. He looked at her hand on his arm. He covered it with his own. He was not gentle. His grip was desperate, as if he were drowning and she were his only air. "He did not hurt you?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "No." He leaned in, his forehead pressing against hers. "I am sorry. Eva, I am sorry I brought this to you. Just be quiet," she whispered. She was the one who kissed him. She leaned in the last few inches, and her mouth found his. It was not a slow kiss. It was a collision. It was her gratitude. It was his relief. It was the desperate need of two people who were utterly alone, finding an anchor in a storm. He responded instantly. His arms went around her, lifting her from the floor as he stood. He did not break the kiss. He carried her the 2 steps to the cot and laid her down, following her, his body caging hers. "Dante," she breathed, his name a prayer on her lips. He kissed her again, deeply, taking her breath. This was not the hesitant, controlled man from before. This was the real man, desperate, hungry. But underneath the hunger, there was something else. A shocking, stunning tenderness. He kissed her mouth, her jaw, the line of her throat. His lips were reverent, as if he were mapping her skin, memorizing her. His hands were not rough. They were shaking. "Eva," he whispered against her neck. I have wanted. For so long." She did not want to talk. She arched against him, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. The danger, the fear, it had all burned away, leaving only this raw, undeniable need. He peeled the flannel shirt from her shoulders, his gaze fixed on her. He kissed the skin he revealed, his touch a slow-burning fire. She felt a safety in his arms that defied all logic. She found the hem of his shirt. Her fingers fumbled with it. She wanted the barrier gone. She pushed it up, her hands sliding over the warm, hard planes of his stomach, over the bandages. She traced the raised, puckered line of an old scar on his ribs, a long-ago knife wound. He winced, not from pain, but from the intimacy of the touch. No one had ever touched his scars with such gentleness. He lowered his head, his mouth finding hers again, and the kiss was slow and deep and full of promises he had no right to make. He kissed her like she was sacred. He treated every inch of her skin as holy ground, a place he was not worthy to be, but could not bear to leave. It was a slow, desperate, tender claiming, a quiet act of worship in the flickering firelight. He held her as if she were the only thing in the world holding him together. And in that moment, she was... Much later, they lay tangled in the blankets. The fire burned down to glowing embers. The shack was quiet. Outside, the snow had begun to fall again, soft and silent, muffling the world. Ava was curled against his side, her head on his chest, her fingers tracing the healed stitches of the wound she had given him. He was alive. He was warm. He was staring at the ceiling, his arm holding her tight, his hand stroking her hair. "You pulled me from death, Ava," he said, his voice a low, rough confession in the dark. She tilted her head to look at him. "I was ready to die out there," he whispered. "I was done. I had nothing left to fight for. This life, it takes everything. It took everything I had." He turned his head, his dark eyes finding hers in the gloom. "But you did not just save my life. You gave me something I did not know I needed, something to fight for, something to live for." Eva did not know what to say. She just lifted her hand and laid it on his cheek. He closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. They said nothing more. There was nothing left to say. They fell asleep in each other's arms, two broken, lost souls, as the silent snow fell around the tiny shack, covering the tracks of the man who had run, and the man who had found a reason to stay. The morning after was a false peace. Eva woke to a quiet she had never known. It was not the silence of being alone, which was a hollow, echoing thing. It was the silence of being held. She was wrapped in Dante's arms, her back pressed to his chest, his breathing a steady, warm rumble against her shoulder blade. The night replayed in her mind, the violence with Rick, the terror, the confession, the desperate, tender release. It felt like a dream, a fever. She was safe, in the arms of a mafia boss, a killer. The paradox of it was not lost on her, but in this moment, she could not find the fear. She only felt warm. She lay still, not wanting to wake him, watching the pale gray light of dawn creep through the frosted window. The snow had stopped. The world was pristine, new. She allowed herself, for one single stolen moment, to believe this could last. Then the sound began. It was not a sound. At first, it was a feeling, a low, rhythmic vibration that came up through the floor, rattling the bones of the tiny shack. It was a whump, whump, whump that grew steadily louder, a pulse from an angry god. Eva sat bolt upright, clutching the blanket to her chest. "What is that?" Dante was already awake. He was not startled. He was resigned. He was out of the cot in one fluid motion, his face a mask of cold composure. He was already pulling on his pants and boots. "They are here," he said. The sound was deafening now. The cheap mugs on her shelf rattled and danced, one of them falling to the floor and shattering. The walls of the shack were physically shaking. It was not a truck. It was not a train. It was a storm, a man-made storm, descending on her small clearing. "Who?" Eva cried, her heart seizing. "Who is here?" "My men." He grabbed her flannel shirt from the floor and tossed it to her. "Get dressed, now." He went to the door, the gun in his hand, and peered out the small window. The light outside was not the gray dawn. It was a brilliant, blinding white, strobing through the trees, churning the snow into a vortex. "Stay behind me," he ordered. He did not ask. He pulled the door open and the sound hit them like a physical blow. It was a roaring, pounding hurricane that stole the breath from her lungs. A massive black helicopter was landing not 30 yards from her porch. It was an obscene, alien thing, a dragonfly of steel and death. Settling in the clearing where she chopped her wood, the rotor wash blasted the snow from the trees, turning the air into a blinding whiteout. Eva cowered behind Dante, her hands over her ears. The machine touched down. The rotors began to slow, but the side door slid open. 4 men, dressed in black tactical gear, jumped out before the skids even settled. They fanned out, their weapons, real automatic weapons, not hunting rifles, held at the ready. They formed a perimeter, their movements precise and terrifying, their bodies sweeping the silent, empty woods. Then another man stepped out. He was not dressed for war. He was dressed for a boardroom, a long, dark wool coat, a perfectly tailored Italian suit, and shoes that cost more than her shack. He was in his late 40s, his hair silver at the temples, his face calm and unreadable. He walked through the snow, his expensive shoes crunching, his gaze landing on Dante. He stopped 10 feet away. His eyes flickered to Ava, cowering in the doorway, and then back to his boss. "Boss," he said. His voice clipped and laced with a deep, palpable relief. "We thought you were dead." "Not yet. Carlo," Dante said. His voice was different, colder. He was no longer Jay, or the man who had held her. He was the man who gave the orders. Dante stepped fully onto the porch, pulling Ava with him. He did not release her. His hand clamped around her arm, a possessive, protective grip. He pulled her from behind his back to his side. Carlo's eyes lingered on Eva, a flicker of professional curiosity in his gaze. He was assessing her, a threat, a liability, a whore. Dante saw the look. "This is Ava," Dante announced, his voice cutting through the thrum of the slowing rotors. The entire world seemed to go silent to hear his next words. "She saved me. She's under my protection now." Carlo's expression did not change, but he nodded, a slight, respectful bow of his head. The words had been spoken. A declaration had been made. Eva was not a liability. She was an asset to be protected. The world tilted. Eva looked at the helicopter. At the men with guns, who were now standing guard, their backs to their boss, at the man in the suit, at the sheer, staggering display of wealth and power that had just landed in her front yard. This was Dante's world, the one he had confessed to, the one he had brought to her door. She felt dizzy. The smell of pine and snow was overwhelmed by the reek of aviation fuel. Her simple life, her fight for $7 tips and her fear of Rick, seemed like a child's game. She wanted to shrink, to run back inside the shack and lock the door, but she knew it was useless. The wolf was at the door, and Dante had just invited him in. The meeting was brief. Dante spoke in rapid, low Italian to Carlo. Eva stood by his side, trembling, understanding nothing but the urgency. Dante's jaw was tight, his anger a controlled burn. Carlo's face was grim. He handed Dante a small, sleek satellite phone. Finally, Dante turned back to her. The men with guns were still outside, a stark, black ring in the white snow. He held out a phone. Not the satellite phone, a different one. Small, black, and simple. "This is a burner," he said, his voice softer, but still firm. He took her hand and pressed it into her palm, closing her fingers around it. "Keep it on you, at all times. Keep it charged. The charger is in the box. Only I will call this number. If anyone else calls, you do not answer. Do you understand?" Eva nodded, her throat too dry to speak. "You are not safe here anymore. Eva," he said, and his eyes were full of a terrible regret. "Not without me. My enemies. They are not stupid. They are looking for me. And when they cannot find me, they will look for anyone who might have helped me. I do not want to be watched," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I cannot live like that." "It is too late for that." It was Carlo who spoke. His English was perfect, with only a trace of an accent. He stepped forward, his expression almost kind, but his eyes were hard. "Miss Carter," he said, as if they were at a tea party. "Eva, you must understand, we've been searching for Mr. Moretti for 9 days. His enemies have been searching, too. The man you knew as Rick. He has been a problem." Eva flinched. "What about Rick?" "He is a fool," Carlo said dismissively. "He went to the local police, drunk, raving about a rich man in a suit at your shack. They laughed at him, so he went to the local bars. He went to the less reputable elements in your town. He has been bragging, trying to sell the information about the rich city man, wounded, hiding with the pretty waitress." Carlo let the words land. "He has painted a target on your back, Miss Carter, a very large one. He does not know who he is inviting, but we do. They will come, not with a helicopter, with fire, and they will not be as kind as Mr. Moretti." Eva's world, the one she had desperately tried to hold on to, shattered. Her home, her normal life, it was gone. Rick, in his drunken stupidity, had burned it to the ground. She was no longer just Eva, the waitress. She was a loose end, a target. The helicopter left an hour later, taking 2 of the tactical men with it. 2, Eva learned, remained. They were not in sight. They were, as Dante put it, in the trees, watching. The shack, which had been her fortress, now felt like a cage. The silence was worse than the noise. Every snap of a twig, every gust of wind made her jump. Dante was a different person. He was on the phone, his voice low, sharp, and lethal. He was the boss again. He was moving pieces on a board she could not see. That night, the tension was unbearable. The space between them, which had been filled with passion, was now filled with an unspoken dread. "You have to leave," Dante said finally, snapping the phone shut. Eva was standing by the stove, her arms wrapped around herself. "Leave? Leave and go where?" "I have a place, a safe house in Virginia. It is secure. It is comfortable. You will have everything you need. My men will protect you." Eva turned, her eyes blazing. "A safe house? You mean a prison? I mean safety?" Dante shot back, his frustration evident. He stood, pacing the small room. "They are coming, Eva! I'm trying to save your life, and I am not a piece of property you lock away," she yelled, the fear and anger finally erupting. "I am not something to be put under your protection in a cage. I have been in a cage my whole life. Dante, a cage of poverty, a cage of this town, a cage of men like Rick thinking they own me. I will not be taken from my home and kept in another. This is not a discussion, Eva. It is not a choice. It is my life," she screamed. "You do not get to save me and then own me. I saved you. I stitched you. I did not sign up to be your prisoner." The words hit him harder than a bullet. He stopped pacing. He stared at her, seeing the fierce, desperate woman he had first seen, the one who had not been broken. He was breaking her. He was treating her exactly like Rick, but with more expensive walls. He scrubbed a hand over his face, the exhaustion of the last week catching up to him. "You are right," he said, his voice dropping, the anger gone. I am not good at this. I am doing this wrong." He walked to her, slow, his hands up in a gesture of surrender. "I am a brute. Eva, I know how to control. I know how to command. I do not know how to ask." He took her hands. They were trembling. "Do not go to the safe house," he said, his voice a low, raw plea. She looked up, confused. "Come with me." "What?" "Not as a hostage, not as property." He lifted a hand, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw, the same gesture that had started it all. "Come with me as the woman who pulled me from death. The woman." "The woman I am falling in love with. I do not want to hide you. Eva, I want to stand with you, but we have to leave this place. Together." The choice hung in the air. A gilded cage or a front row seat to a war, the fight, the fear, the sudden, terrifying hope of his confession. It was too much. The dam of her emotions broke. She did not cry. She acted. She surged forward, grabbing the front of his shirt. She pulled his mouth down to hers, and it was not a kiss of tenderness. It was a kiss of anger and fear, in a way, of acceptance. It was a clash of teeth and will. He responded instantly, a low groan in his chest. His control, which he had held onto for days, snapped. This was not the slow, gentle lover. This was the mafia boss, the man of raw power and desperate hunger. He lifted her off the floor, her feet dangling, and slammed her back against the wall of the shack. The impact was hard, but she did not care. His mouth was on hers, on her jaw, on her neck, a desperate, claiming fire. She wrapped her legs around his waist, holding on, anchoring herself to him. He was a man possessed. He carried her, his mouth never leaving hers, and set her on the small, rickety kitchen counter. Her mugs and the box of oats clattered to the floor, forgotten. He was between her legs, caging her, his body pressed tight against hers. "You are mine. Eva," he whispered, his voice a wreck, his forehead pressed to hers. "I will not let them touch you. I will not let you go." "I am not yours," she gasped, her hands fisted in his shirt, tearing at the buttons, needing to feel his skin. "I am with you." "Then be with me," he rasped. He kissed her again, a deep, bruising kiss that tasted of fear and ownership. It was a firestorm. It was not lovemaking. It was a declaration, a claiming of life in the face of death. He gripped her thighs, his fingers digging in, pulling her to the edge of the counter. She met his hunger with her own, a raw, primal need. It was a promise, a seal, a desperate, silent vow. They clung to each other in the aftermath, their breath ragged, the cold air of the shack forgotten. She was still on the counter, her arms locked around his neck, her face buried in his shoulder. The anger was gone. The fear was still there. But it was a shared thing now. "I will leave," she said, her voice muffled against his skin. He pulled back, his eyes searching hers, ready for another fight. "I will leave," she repeated, her voice stronger. She met his gaze. "But I am not going to a safe house, and I am not hiding. You said someone betrayed you. You said they are hunting you." She took his face in her hands. "I am not going to sit in a gilded cage wondering if you are alive or dead. If I go with you, to the end, to confront whoever did this to you." Dante stared at her. He had expected her to run. He had expected her to break. He had never, in his entire life, met anyone like her. She was not running from the fire. She was offering to walk into it with him. A slow, dangerous smile touched his lips. It was the first real smile she had ever seen on his face. "Then we go together," he said. He sealed the promise with a kiss. It was not a kiss of hunger or of anger. It was a kiss of partnership, a quiet, deadly promise against the dark. The world beyond the Appalachian Ridge was not a world Eva had ever known. They had left the shack just after dawn. Dante had made one call on the satellite phone, and the black helicopter had returned, a silent, efficient monster in the morning mist. This time, there was no conversation. They boarded. Eva carried nothing but the burner phone in her pocket and the clothes on her back. She did not look back at the tiny shack. It was no longer a home. It was a tomb, a place marked for death. The flight was short, landing in a private airfield she did not recognize. From there, a black, armored sedan, not a Suburban. This was low, sleek, and silent. The windows were so thick, they seemed to warp the light. The inside smelled of rich leather and cold steel. Dante sat beside her, but he was not the man from the shack. The man who had held her, who had confessed his fears, was gone. In his place was Mr. Moretti. He was dressed in a clean, dark suit provided by Carlo, who sat in the front passenger seat. Dante's face was stone. He was a king returning to his court, and his mind was on the executioner's axe. Eva said nothing. She watched the rolling hills of Virginia pass by. Green and manicured, this was horse country, rich country. The poverty of Ash Hollow was another planet. After an hour, they turned off the main road onto a private drive marked by a stone gate, but no name. The drive wound through dense, old-growth forest for another 2 miles before opening onto an estate that stole Eva's breath. It was not a house. It was a fortress made of glass and stone, built into the side of a mountain, overlooking a valley that seemed to belong only to them. It was modern, severe, and beautiful, but it was not warm. It was a place of power, not comfort. The car did not go to the front door. It drove past into a subterranean garage that sealed behind them, plunging them into a silence broken only by the car's idling engine. "Carlo," Dante said, his voice flat, "secure the perimeter. No one in or out without my word. Get our men on the high ground. I want eyes on that gate." "Already done, boss," Carlo said. "They are waiting in the library. He brought 4 men. We have 8. He did not come alone, then," Dante said, a grim, humorless smile touching his lips. "He is braver than I thought." "Dante," Eva whispered, her hand finding his. The suit felt alien under her fingers. He looked at her, and for a second the mask cracked. He saw her fear. He squeezed her hand, his thumb rubbing the knuckle. "You wanted to come. This is the part where you stay quiet. You watch, and you let me handle my family." He turned to Carlo. "Take her to the panic room first. Show her the door. She's to be put inside if I give the word." "No," Eva said. Both men turned to look at her. "I'm not hiding in a closet," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "I came to see. I need to see the man who did this. I need to see you." Dante stared at her for a long, hard second. He saw the iron in her spine. He nodded. A single, sharp dip of his chin. "Fine, but you stay with Carlo. And you do not speak. You do not move. You are a ghost." The house was cold. The floors were polished marble that echoed their footsteps. The library was a 2-story room, walled in dark mahogany and books that looked as if they had never been read. A fireplace, large enough to stand in, was dark and empty, and in the center, 2 men stood. One was older, in his late 60s, with a shock of white hair and a deeply lined, mournful face. He wore a suit that was even more expensive than Dante's. This was Luca. He looked like a grandfather, a scholar. He had the air of a man who had seen everything. Dante walked into the room. He did not go to the desk. He stood in the middle of the floor, a general on a battlefield of his own making. Eva and Carlo stayed in the massive arched doorway, 2 shadows in the periphery. "Luca," Dante said. His voice was not loud, but it filled the room, cold and heavy. "Dante," Luca said, his voice a gravelly baritone. He even smiled, a sad, thin smile. "You are a hard man to kill. I always said that. You have your father's constitution." The admission was instant. No games, no denial. Dante simply nodded. "You were my father's most trusted man, his consigliere. After he died, you were my teacher. You were my family." "I was," Luca agreed, stepping toward a crystal decanter of whiskey. He poured 2 glasses. "And I guided this family. I built what your father started. I made us legitimate. I moved us out of the gutter and into these houses. And then you tried to put me in a grave." Luca held a glass out. Dante ignored it. Luca sighed and set it down. "You were getting soft. Dante, this legitimate world, you were starting to believe in it. You were forgetting what we are, forgetting who we are. We are wolves, and you were trying to be a sheep. So you sold me out," Dante stated. "Who was it, the Rinaldis? The old families in New York." "This is where you show your youth," Luca said, his tone one of disappointment, like a professor scolding a student. "The Rinaldis are cattle. This was bigger." Eva watched, mesmerized. This was not a confrontation. It was a negotiation, a lesson. Dante was not yelling. He was using logic. He was letting Luca talk. "The feds," Dante said, his voice dropping. Luca smiled. "A conspiracy. You see, you were always smart, just unfocused. The new head of the organized crime division, he wants a name. He wants a big win. He did not just want a boss. He wanted you. So you made a deal. My head. In exchange for what? Immunity? You get to keep all this?" "I get to protect the family," Luca suddenly roared, his grandfatherly facade cracking. "I get to ensure our survival. He gives us a pass. He lets us operate. He just needed one high-profile sacrifice. You. And you were going to give it all away anyway. Chasing legitimate deals, refusing to take the old contracts. You were weak. And the ambush?" Dante asked, his voice still dangerously calm. "It was supposed to be clean." Luca spat. The Rinaldis would take the blame. The feds would have their body. I would take the chair. I would stabilize the family, and the war would be over. But you always have to be difficult. You ran. You are a rat, Luca, Dante said simply. I am a king, Luca countered. I am protecting the legacy. You were destroying it. You brought federal agents into our business. You put a target on every man, every wife, every child in this family. You did not do it to save us. You did it for you. Dante took a step closer. The air in the room became thick, electric. And you used my own men to do it, Dante whispered. Ava saw it then. The 4 men Luca had brought were not standing by the door. They were spread through the room, their hands inside their jackets. They were Dante's men, his traitors. Dante, it is done, Luca said, raising his glass. Just accept it, die, and let the family live. Dante looked at Luca, and Eva saw the killer she had been warned about. You are right about one thing. Old man, Dante said, his voice a silky, deadly purr. I was unfocused. Dante moved his head. A fraction of an inch, a signal. Carlo, he said. Carlo, who had been a ghost by the door, was in motion. His hand did not go for his own gun. He grabbed Ava by the arm. The wall, he hissed. He slammed his hand against a section of the mahogany bookshelf. A small, hidden door clicked open, revealing a dark, steel-lined space. Get in, he ordered. But Dante, now! The first gunshot exploded in the room. It was not a pop. It was a deafening cannon blast that shook the glass. Ava screamed. Carlo shoved her into the panic room. Stay down, he yelled, and slammed the heavy steel door. Eva was plunged into absolute, terrifying darkness. She was alone. The room was small, steel-lined, and smelled of concrete and oil. It was soundproofed. Not perfectly, but enough. She heard the chaos outside, but it was muffled, as if it were happening underwater. A series of thuds, shouting, in Italian. More gunshots, a rapid, frantic exchange. A man screamed, a high C, terrible sound that was cut off instantly. She heard a heavy crash, the sound of a body hitting the desk, or maybe the door. She backed into the far corner, her hands over her mouth, her body shaking so hard she could barely stand. The library. Her mind supplied. He was in the library. She thought of the wood smoke, the feel of his arms around her, the man who had confessed he was tired of this life, and he was dying. He was dying, and she was in a box. Then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. Silence. The silence was worse than the gunfire. It was absolute, a thick, heavy blanket of death. Who was alive? Who was dead? She heard a single, low groan. It was muffled by the door. She would not. She was not a prisoner. She was not a woman who hid in a box. She found the handle on the inside, a heavy steel bar. She pushed. The door was heavy, but it moved. She opened it a crack. The library smelled of sulfur and copper. The air was hazy with gun smoke. She saw Carlo first. He was on one knee, his gun still up, aimed at the door. He was breathing hard, but he was alive. She saw the bodies, 4 of them, the traitors. They were sprawled on the expensive rug, their suits ruined, their eyes open and empty. She saw Luca. He was slumped over the marble desk, his head in the whiskey decanter, which had shattered, the amber liquid mixing with the dark, pooling blood, and she saw Dante. He was on the floor, his back against the leg of the desk, his legs sprawled out. His gun was on the floor, just out of his reach. He was alive. He was looking at her, but he was holding his side, his left side, just above his hip. His hand and the expensive fabric of his suit were slick with fresh, dark blood. No, Eva whispered. No, not again. She ran. She did not wait for Carlo. She did not look at the dead men. She flew across the room and dropped to her knees in front of him. You are shot, she said, her voice stupid with shock. Dante looked at her, and a small, pain-filled laugh escaped him. You are very observant, Eva. Shut up. She tore his suit jacket open, her hands fumbling. The white shirt beneath was a ruin. It was a through and through. The bullet had gone in his side. High on the hip, it was bleeding, a lot. "Carlo!" she screamed, not taking her eyes off the wound. "Get me the kit, the first aid kit, now!" She pressed both her hands onto the wound, hard. Dante roared, a guttural sound of agony, and his hand shot out, grabbing her wrist. "Do not stop," she commanded him, her voice shaking but fierce. "But do not stop me either." She was no longer the frightened waitress. She was the woman who had stitched him together in the snow. She was angry. Carlo was there. Ripping open a military-grade medical kit, he tossed her a pressure bandage. "The sirens," Carlo said, his voice tight. He was reloading his gun. "I can hear them. The local police. The feds Luca was talking to. They must have been listening." "Get the car," Dante managed, gritting his teeth as Ava packed the wound. "I cannot move you," Carlo said. "Get the car." Dante growled. They fled the estate, a palace of death, just as the first wail of sirens grew loud at the gate. Carlo drove, his face a grim mask. Ava was in the back, her body half curled around Dante, her hand still pressed to the bandage on his side, trying to keep him from bleeding out. He was pale, his skin clammy. He had lost too much blood, again. He looked at her. His eyes were not the eyes of a boss. They were the eyes of the man from the shack. He looked at her hands, covered in his blood. He looked at her face, streaked with tears and smoke. This is all I do," he whispered, his voice broken. "Dante, do not talk. Just breathe." "No," he insisted. This life. I kill. I bleed. And I stain. I stain everything I touch." He looked at her bloody hands. "I stained you." The confession was a ragged, painful thing. "I am tired of this life. Eva," he whispered, his eyes closing. "I am so tired. I want to build something. Something that does not destroy everything I touch." Eva watched his pained, exhausted face, the face of a man who had everything and was dying with nothing. She leaned down, her lips close to his ear. "Then start with me," she whispered, her voice fierce. "You start with me, but I am warning you, Dante Moretti. I will not spend the rest of my life in a panic room. I will not be the woman who hides. You do not ask me to run forever." His eyes opened. He stared at her, really seeing her, his partner, his equal, the woman who had pulled him from death twice. He made a decision. It was not the decision of a boss or a king. It was the decision of a man. "Carlo," he said, his voice gaining a sudden, sharp clarity. "Boss?" Luca was right about one thing. The family needs to be stabilized, and he was right about another. "I was a bad king. Dante, you are not." "I am," he said. "I want out. We are going to burn the empire down. Carlo?" "From the inside." Carlo's eyes met his in the rearview mirror. "How?" "We find the rest of the rats, the feds, the Rinaldis. We find them all. We use them against each other." Dante looked at Ava. "And then we vanish. You take the chair. You run it clean, the way I should have." "And you?" Carlo asked. Dante looked at Ava. He laid his bloody hand over hers. "I am going to build something." Eva watched them, and she knew her role had changed again. She was not the healer. She was not the lover. She was not the observer. She was the planner. "Dante Moretti killed," Eva said, her voice quiet in the speeding car. The two men looked at her. "What?" Dante asked. "That is the headline," Eva said, her mind working with a cold, clear logic she did not know she possessed. "That is the final move. The feds want a body. The Rinaldis want you gone. Luca's men want a new boss. You do not just vanish. Dante, they will hunt you forever. You have to give them what they want." Dante stared at her, a slow, dangerous, and deeply admiring smile spreading across his pale face. "You give them a body," Eva finished. "You give them yours." The plan was Eva's. It was born in the desperate, adrenaline-fueled silence of the getaway car, and it was brutal in its simplicity. Dante Moretti had to die. While Dante healed from his second gunshot wound in a secure, nondescript medical facility loyal to Carlo, the pieces were set in motion. The war was invisible. fought in whispers and data transfers. Dante, guided by Ava's cold logic and Carlo's loyal hand, began to burn the empire down. He fed information to the feds, just enough to turn them against the Rinaldis, pointing them toward the very treachery Luca had initiated. He leaked financials to the Rinaldis, convincing them that Luca's failed coup was a sign of federal infiltration, turning his rivals into his unwitting cleanup crew. It was a masterpiece of destruction, orchestrated from a hospital bed. The final act was for the public. 3 weeks after the massacre at the Virginia estate, the news cycle was saturated. Dante Moretti, presumed heir to crime dynasty, still at large. The federal case was falling apart. The Rinaldis were in chaos, and Dante Moretti was a ghost. He needed to become a corpse. Carlo secured a yacht in Miami, one that was known to be a favorite of Dante's. He staged a meeting. He leaked Dante's location to both the Rinaldis and his new federal partners. He made it look like a trap. Then, Carlo's own men, the most loyal, planted the explosives. The news report was spectacular. A $20 million yacht, vaporized in a fireball that lit up the Miami night. It was a clear public execution. The Rinaldis, the feds, the old families, everyone could claim a victory. The feds closed their case. The Rinaldis celebrated their rise. And Carlo, with a public display of vengeful grief, took the empty chair at the head of the Moretti family, vowing to rebuild. The news called him presumed dead in mob violence. There was no body to find. Dante Moretti was erased. Their goodbye was the hardest part. It was not in a luxury hospital. It was at a bus station in a town 2 states away from Ash Hollow. He was still pale, his arm in a sling beneath his coat, but he was alive. "You're sure?" he asked her, his voice rough. He held her hand, his thumb tracing her knuckles in the crowded, dirty terminal. "It is the only way," Ava said. She was dressed in new, simple clothes. She looked like a woman who had just been visiting a sick relative. "They will never stop looking. Not for you, but for her," she gestured to herself. "Eva Carter is nobody. They will forget. You have to let them forget." "I will not forget," he said, his voice fierce. "I am not asking you to. I am asking you to be smart. You have to disappear. Dante, for real. Let Carlo clean the house. Let the world think you are ashes. Then, come find me." "And you?" he asked, his eyes dark with a fear she had never seen. Fear for her. "I'm going home. I am going to be the boring, poor waitress you found. I am going to live my quiet life. Rick is gone. He will not be back. I will be fine. I will be safe. You will not be alone," he promised. "You will not see them, but my men will be there. The 2 I left, they are yours now. They will watch the ridge. They will keep you safe until I can—" He pulled her into the shadows between 2 buses, his good arm wrapping around her waist. He kissed her, and it was not a kiss of passion. It was a kiss of desperation. It was a brand. "Wait for me," he whispered against her lips. "I will," she said. He let her go. She boarded the bus, and she did not look back. Returning to Ash Hollow was like stepping into her own past. The shack was as she had left it, cold, empty, the floorboards still stained with his blood. The first night was the worst. The silence was the hollow, lonely kind again. She lay on the cot, wrapped in his blanket, and for the first time, she cried. She cried for the man she had sent away, for the life she could not have. Then she got up. She was a survivor. She had survived poverty. She had survived Rick. She had survived the Mafia. She would survive this. She went back to the diner. Her boss, gruff and secretly relieved, hired her back. No questions asked. The townspeople whispered they knew Rick was gone, run out of the county, terrified. They knew a black helicopter had landed, but no one knew the truth. They just knew Eva Carter was different. She was still quiet, still poor, but she was not scared anymore. Her life fell into a routine. Work, walk home, chop wood. Read by the fire. She knew she was being watched. The 2 men Dante had left, ghosts, he had called them, were true to their word. She never saw them. But one morning, After a heavy snowfall, her woodpile was stacked high, fresh-cut oak that she had not touched. Another day, a local troublemaker who had cornered her behind the diner found himself with a flat tire. On all 4 tires, Eva just kept her head down. She was safe. She was waiting. The snows melted, spring came to the mountain, a violent, beautiful explosion of green. The dogwoods bloomed. Eva planted a small garden. She fixed the porch step. The memory of Dante was a dull, constant ache, a phantom limb. She clutched the burner phone he had given her. It had never rung. It was her only icon, a small, black piece of plastic that held all her hope. Summer was hot and humid. She worked. She saved her meager tips. Autumn burned the leaves to red and gold. The air grew crisp. She had been feeling tired for weeks. The smell of the diner's grease, which had never bothered her, now made her stomach roll. She was late. She'd been late before. Stress. Poor nutrition, but this was different. She bought the test in the next town over, paying cash. She sat on the edge of her cot, the small plastic stick in her trembling hand. The fire crackled in the stove. The sun was setting, painting the shack in shades of orange and purple. 2 lines. She was pregnant. Her hand went to her stomach, flat and unchanged. A baby, Dante's baby, a small, secret piece of him that was growing inside her, a life forged in that cold, desperate night. She did not know whether to laugh or to sob. She did both. This was a complication he could not have predicted. This was a secret she would have to hold alone. He was a ghost. He was presumed dead. And she was carrying his child. The first snow of the new winter fell 2 weeks later. Eva was on the porch, wrapped in a quilt, watching the flakes drift down. She was 6 months along, her body swollen, a gentle, rounded curve under her thick sweater. The town whispered, but no one dared ask. She felt peaceful. The fear was gone. She had a purpose. That was when she heard the car. It was not a roar, like Rick's truck. It was the quiet, expensive purr of a finely tuned engine. Her hand instantly went to her stomach. A protective gesture. Her ghosts, her watchers, would not have let a stranger get this close. A black car, a simple, elegant sedan, nothing like the armored fortress from before, rolled to a stop in her clearing. The snow was falling on its polished roof. The driver's door opened. He stepped out. Eva's breath caught in her throat. Her heart stopped. It was Dante, but it was not. The suits were gone. The cold armor of the boss was gone. He wore simple, dark jeans, a thick gray cashmere sweater, and a dark wool coat. His hair was a little longer. He was thinner, maybe, but he looked healthy. He looked young. The lines of stress and command had been wiped from his face. He looked like the man he was always supposed to be. He stood by the car, just looking at her. He did not move. His eyes were fixed on her face, and then his gaze dropped to her hands resting on the swell of her stomach. His expression broke, the composure, the stillness. It just shattered. His eyes filled with a stunned, raw, overwhelming emotion. Eva stood up, the quilt dropping to the porch. He started to walk toward her, slowly, as if he was afraid she was a mirage. She met him halfway. She walked down the steps, her boots crunching in the new snow. They stopped a foot apart. He raised a hand, his fingers trembling, and touched her cheek. "Ava," he whispered. It was a prayer. She slapped him. Her hand cracked across his face, the sound sharp and violent in the snowy silence. It was for the months of silence, for the fear, for the loneliness, for the terror of being pregnant and alone. He did not flinch. He just took it. He turned his head back, his eyes full of a pain he deserved. "I know," he whispered. You, she started, her voice breaking, the tears she had held back for a new year finally coming. She hit his chest, her fists pounding against the soft wool. "You did not call. You did not. I did not know. I thought you were dead. I thought you were really dead." She was sobbing now, her hits getting weaker. He took it until she was done. Then he wrapped his arms around her. He pulled her against his chest, his arms locking around her, one hand tangling in her hair, the other pressing her close. He buried his face in her neck. "I am sorry," he choked out, his voice thick. "I am so sorry. I had to. Eva, I had to be a ghost. I had to let the world move on. I had to be clean. For you." She did not pull away. She wrapped her arms around his neck, clinging to him, her tears soaking his coat. She was home. He was home. "I told you I would guard the door," he whispered, his lips in her hair, his voice rough with emotion. "I just had to burn the house down first." He held her for a long time, just standing in the falling snow, two figures in the white landscape. Finally, he pulled back, his hands framing her face, wiping her tears away with his thumbs. His eyes were shining. He looked down at her stomach, at the life she was carrying. "Ava," he said, his voice full of wonder, his hand moving to rest gently on her belly. Is this?" She nodded, a fresh wave of tears. "I did not know how to tell you." "I came," he said, his own tears spilling over. "I came as soon as it was clean, as soon as Carlo said the last piece was in place. I did not know." He laughed, a real, broken, beautiful laugh. He knelt in the snow, his $1 billion coat soaking in the mud, and he pressed his forehead to her stomach. "A baby," he whispered. He stood, pulling her back into his arms, and he kissed her. It was not a kiss of hunger or fear. It was a kiss of forever. It was slow and deep, and it tasted of salt and snow, and a promise finally kept. They went inside. The shack was small, but it was not cold. He built the fire, the way he had done when he was Jay. She made coffee. They sat on the cot, his arm wrapped around her head on his shoulder. He told her how Carlo had solidified his power, how the federal agents were in prison, how the Rinaldis were broken. He was a free man, because Dante Moretti was dead. "So who are you?" she asked, tracing the line of his jaw. "I am the man you stitched together," he said. "I am your baby's father. I am just Dante." They sat in silence, watching the snow fall outside the window. It was the same scene as that first night, the cold, the isolation, the fear. But this time, it was different. This time, they were together. The shack was warm. "It is a good house," Ava said quietly. Looking out the window, Dante followed her gaze. In the distance, on the next ridge over, just visible through the trees, was a new structure. It was not the shack. It was the frame of a house. It was not a palace. It was not an estate. It was low and modern, with walls of glass and strong beams of cedar. It was built into the mountain, safe and simple. "The foundation is solid," Dante said. "It will be ready before the spring, before he, or she, arrives." "Just the way I like it," Eva murmured, leaning into him. He had left the mafia. He had left the power, the money, the violence. He had not lost his empire. He had traded it. He had traded it for a woman who had pulled him from the snow, for a child he had never known he wanted, and for a life he was finally ready to live. He had not lost power. He had, for the first time in his entire life, found something worth living for. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed the journey with Eva and Dante. I would love to hear your thoughts. Where in the world are you listening from? Please let me know in the comments below. If you love stories like this, be sure to subscribe to Mafia Romance Stories for more. And please, share your thoughts in English on what you loved, what you felt, and what you hope to see next.